One of my favourite paintings is Caravaggio's The Supper at Emmaus. Caravaggio depicts in that famous style of his in light and dark the moment when the disciples recognise Jesus. And if you look at the painting, they're almost kind of leaping out of their seats. They suddenly recognise him. But of course, they were prepared for that moment. They were prepared for that moment looking at the light and the dark in their own lives and the light and dark of the death and resurrection of Christ. Christ has prepared them for this moment by walking with them, first listening to them, and then explaining their own faith to them, so that not only their life, but their whole religion and their whole way of life is made sense of by Christ's death and resurrection. And suddenly they realise that they have to recognise Christ in a totally different way and relate to him in a totally new way. If you look at that painting, the innkeeper is completely oblivious. He's just serving the food because he's not a believer. He hasn't been prepared. So he doesn't recognise Jesus as the risen Lord. To him, it's just someone else that he's serving food to. But to the disciples, they realise that in the breaking of bread, Jesus is with them. There's a crucial moment in the Road to Emmaus story where the disciples invite Jesus in to stay with them. It is nearly evening, they say, and the day is almost over. And so he goes in to dine with them, and that is depicted in that wonderful painting by Caravaggio. What makes them invite this person in to dine with them? Is it just hospitality, which you would expect from the culture and the history of those people? No. There has been something going on, and we know by what they say afterwards that their hearts were stirring, that something was going on. But it needed them to sit down and break bread before it finally clicked. This is the risen Jesus. Because the disciples now know they have to relate to Christ, not as they did as he was walking around, curing people, feeding the 5,000, walking on the water, preaching to the crowds. They relate to him in a totally new way in the sacraments and in the scriptures. This is how they relate to him in their time and place. And the inn, as it were, is the church. Why we have church buildings is because space and time are important to us. We need to encounter Christ here and now, in the things and in the words and in the symbols and in the talking. We need to talk. You and I need to talk. We need to dialogue. We need to talk and listen, and it's in that process that we are enabled to finally say what it is that matters to us, finally to articulate what it is that's going on. In these Emmaus walks that I'm inviting you to at the end of September and then at other times in the year towards Christmas, I hope that you and I will be able to have that kind of conversation where we realise that it's in this conversation that Christ is present, that we will be able to open up about what's been going on in our lives in the last few months, where we've found Christ, where Christ has been present, where he's seemed absent, and to listen to the words of Scripture that will stir our hearts and enable us to finally recognise Christ in the breaking of the bread, in the other sacraments, in our prayer, in our daily lives, to recognise him just as the disciples recognised him as really present in the events of our life.